to the fourth episode of Impact Etching University. Today we'll talk about a very important topic, that is creating perfect etchings or engravings. You've probably seen the etchings that are either too dark or are so white that faces are kind of washed out and you don't see the halftones, everything is white. To a lot of people, creating a perfect color balance in engraved image is a little bit of a dark magic that involves a lot of trial and error. What I will talk about in this episode is how to always achieve the correct result. I will talk about the rational process of creating the perfect etching. A rational process is, by definition, a sequence of steps that is, when followed correctly and to the letter, guarantees the correct result. So, however pseudoscientific it sounds, please bear with me and I'll try to explain it. So, here's the axiom of perfect engraving. Perfect engraving is a combination of properly configured etching machine, where that proper configuration is achieved by using standardized and objective testing images on one side and perfectly color balanced images on the other side. Again, you will get perfect engraving when you combine perfectly configured engraving machine with perfectly color balanced image. Let's now try to expand on these definitions and understand how to implement it in real life. In this particular episode, I will concentrate on how do we at impactetching.com with all of our customers achieve the first part, perfectly configured engraving machine. In the next episode of this series, we'll talk about how to get perfectly color balanced images, how to recognize that image is not color balanced, and how to objectively measure whether image is correctly prepared and how to fix it in case the image is not correctly color balanced. So let's talk about how do we configure the engraving machine correctly. Let's talk about configuring the machine with standardized images. Why do we need this standardized image? Very simple, because our eyes are really not a good measure of brightness of a particular picture. Our eyes are kind of very well designed to see the relative brightness, but there's a lot of things that can throw our measurements off. If you remember that picture that was going around on the internet about women's dress, which different people had different perception of, whether it was gold or whether it was blue, it all depended on a particular person. Let me demonstrate this to you. Take a look at this image, at this portrait. Does it look bright enough to you? Hard to judge, eh? Now, this image. Compare the two, this one versus this one. Does this one look bright to you? It definitely is brighter, but is it as bright as it can get? The truth is, it is not. This is the brightest image. This is the correctly color balanced image. This image is missing approximately 30 colors off the top of its palette. And you cannot even notice it by looking at it, or even by comparing these two images. They look very much the same, yet this one will look much worse when engraved because it's not bright enough. So how do we solve the problem of objectively configuring the engraving machine? We use the standardized test image. This is an example of the image we use. We call it the palette or the test square or just the square. Typical black and white halftone image contains 256 colors. We call it grayscale palette. This square contains all of the 256 colors, starting from perfect black at the bottom to perfect white at the top. When we engrave the square, to better recognize all the images, because they don't always come out clearly when we just configure our engraving machine, we have those notches. There's 16 notches horizontally and 16 notches vertically, 16 times 6, 256 colors. The idea is to configure your engraving machine to ensure that white colors in your image appear white on the stone and darker colors, black colors on the image appear black on the stone. So basically what I ask my customers to do, and pretty much every engraving machine has some way of configuring it. It has a way of telling the machine how strongly to hit the stone for each particular color. So what I'm telling my customers is, take this material, take this type of granite that you engrave, and engrave this square, and by adjusting the parameters of the machine, you need to achieve the situation when approximately 3 lines at the top look perfect white, and by perfect white I mean you can run your fingers across the stone and you feel the polish completely removed, because that is as white as you can get with any given polished stone. So continuing this, 3 first lines on the top should be perfect white, approximately 3 lines at the bottom should be perfect black, and you should see the smooth change of color in between. That is how you achieve the halftones. That's how you ensure that the halftones on your portraits or on any image that you engrave will also appear as halftones on the stone, and your engraving will be A, bright enough, and B, not washed out. You will not want to lose the halftones and just over-exaggerate with brightness. You know, sometimes customers call me and ask me, Andrei, is my machine configured correctly? And they send me these screenshots of their material configuration, which contains those brightness and contrast parameters and whatnot. And I'm always telling them, the only way for us to tell if machine is configured correctly is to engrave the square. The measure of correctly configured machine is the perfectly looking square with your current settings. The thing is, because all of the machines that we use in real life, be it our machines or which have like mechanical components, and all mechanical components are slightly different, and this results in the fact that the same setting when implemented in one machine might not work perfectly on the other machine. So every machine achieves ideal configuration with different settings for brightness and contrast parameters. And I guess it's probably the same for laser, because laser tubes, they can leak CO2. Lasers are very, very sensitive to the temperature of the environment and a lot of other factors. The idea is that you should not really look at subjective numerical parameters and configuration of your machine. The only objective measure is, again, perfectly engraved square. So what are the implications of this? The major implication is that you should configure your engraving machine once. Again, the measure of good configuration is perfectly looking, test image, and then just leave it. From that point on, if your engraving on a perfectly configured machine does not look good, the problem is not with the machine. The problem is with operator. I'm just kidding. The problem is with the image, of course. 2 components again, properly configured machine and properly configured image. When you try to have them meet at some perfect point, it really helps to fix this part of equation. Then you can vary or adjust your image without always getting paranoid about tweaking the machine. If you try to tweak both of the parameters, you'll waste a lot of time constantly changing the brightness on your image, the parameters on your machine. You drive yourself mad, you spend a lot of time on doing this, and it's just not good practice. Again, out of these 2 equations that need to meet to create perfect engraving, let's start with fixing one of the sides of this equation. That means let's configure our engraving machine correctly and then do not touch it. If your image doesn't come out in a perfect way, look at the image, adjust the image, never tweak your machine. Coming back to the subject of configuring your engraving machine perfectly and then taking care of the image if it doesn't come out well enough, I want to tell you the story. I know a gentleman who has been editing images for some of the customers that use our engraving machines. Let's call him Peter. And he's really great in image editing, but his images were consistently a little bit too dark. And I've been talking to him about it. On one occasion, I've seen one of the images he prepared for a customer, and I was telling him, "Hey Peter, your image is just too dark. Not a lot, but quite a bit. Why don't you color balance the image?" And he said, "My customer is used to this and they like it, and I want to prepare it to them like this." And only later I recognized what happened. Peter was consistently creating the images that are not bright enough, and so when he was helping his customers configure their engraving machines, they ended up basically jacking the strength of hit on the machine to compensate for his images that were too dark. So what happens in that case, if you consistently get the images that are too dark, it might actually work. Your machine is out of alignment, it hits the stone too strong, but it will work with dark images. But then when you, for example, get a correctly balanced image from some image library and you try to engrave it with your machine that's not set up correctly, everything will be washed out, everything will be too bright, you will lose the halftones. That's why no matter what, we always want to start with properly configured machine and leave it like that. By the way, that is why the image editing service that we offer our customers through imagemart.com is so important. It's like small plug of shameless self-promotion, but I wanted to explain to you why we ended up actually offering this service to customers at really laughingly low price of $20 per portrait. When I configure new machines at the customer, I control this part of equation. I help them set up their machines so that they configure it perfectly. But through ImageMart, through helping our customers prepare images for engraving, be it a portrait or scene or any photograph they send us, we also control this part of equation, which means we configure machines for our customers perfectly, and we also give them the images that are perfectly color balanced. This way we kind of guarantee that whatever they engrave with our machines using our service will come out correctly. For us, this very cheap, arguably, service that we offer to our customer is not so much a way of making money, but a way of really creating peace of mind for ourselves and for customers, so that our customers don't keep calling us and telling us, "Hey, this image I just engraved it came out too dark, or it came out too bright." We take care of all of this. So yeah, to that point, if you haven't used our service yet, shoot me an email or shoot me a personal message on Facebook, and I'll set you up to try our image editing service. I hope this is useful, and I hope you like this episode. In the next episode, we'll talk about color balancing images correctly. And as a preview to that, I can tell you that color balancing the images is something that almost nobody does properly. Even the professionals who prepare images for engraving don't do it properly. It's a very important aspect that I want to cover, and I hope you'll find time to tune into the next episode of this series, which I hope to publish 1 week from now. Thank you very much, and see you in the next episode.